I bet $5,000 no one can fix my bike.
Garrett Steele slammed the catch in the car.
I can fix it.
He turned, saw Owen, 18, skinny, grease-covered.
Who let this cockroach in here?
Grabbed Owen by the throat, slammed him into the wall.
You smell like a sewer boy. Don't breathe near my Harley!
Spit landed on Owen's cheek, deliberate.
15 real mechanics couldn't fix it, and you filthy little parasite, you think you can...
A biker kicked Owen's toolbox across the concrete. Tools scattered. Owen wiped his face, knelt, picked up his wrench.
Give me 5 minutes. Hell's Angels don't lose bets not to garbage like you.
Owen tightened his grip. But none of them knew this kid was about to make every mechanic there look like a fool. The iron rail sat at the dead end of Michigan Avenue, where Detroit stopped pretending. No signs, no lights. Just a concrete bunker with Harley-Davidsons lined up like soldiers outside, and a parking lot full of leather and smoke. Every summer, the Hells Angels Detroit chapter rolled in for what they called the Gathering. 15 to 20 riders, chrome pipes, thunder that rattled the windows of every house 3 blocks out. And at the center of it all, Garrett Steele, 50 years old, president of the Detroit chapter for 11 years straight. A man who settled arguments with his fists and never lost one. His word was law in this parking lot. His temper was the weather. And his bike, a 1972 Harley-Davidson shovelhead they called Black Fury, was sacred. Nobody touched Black Fury. Nobody sat on it. Nobody even leaned against it after dark. That bike had crossed every state line in America. Garrett's father built the engine by hand in 1971. It was more than metal. It was bloodline. So when Black Fury died in the middle of Interstate 94, engines sputtering, coughing, then nothing, Garrett didn't call a tow truck. He called Dale Prescott. Dale ran the biggest garage in Wayne County. 40 years in the business, a wall of certificates behind his desk. He showed up in a company truck with 2 assistants and a diagnostic scanner that cost more than most people's cars. 30 minutes. That's how long Dale spent under the hood. He stood up, wiped his hands, shook his head. Can't figure it. Might be the whole engine block. I'd need to tear it down at my shop. 2, maybe 3 weeks. Garrett stared at him. You're telling me you can't fix it. I'm telling you it's complicated. Get out of my sight before I make it complicated for you. Dale packed his tools and left without another word. The crowd watched him go. Nobody said anything, but a few of them smirked. The great Dale Prescott, 40 years of certificates, couldn't even get a diagnosis. Next came Nolan Briggs, the vintage Harley specialist, the guy every collector in Michigan called when they needed a shovelhead or a panhead brought back from the dead. Nolan had oil in his veins. He'd been rebuilding old Harleys since before Owen was born. He spent 45 minutes, pulled the carburetor apart piece by piece, cleaned every jet, checked every gasket, put it all back together with the precision of a surgeon. Tried the kickstart. Once, twice, 3 times. 4, 5, 6. Nothing. Not even a cough. The carb's clean, Nolan said. This engine's just done. These old shovelheads, they hit a wall eventually. I've seen it a dozen times. Nothing left to do. Garrett grabbed Nolan by the shirt and yanked him forward. You're supposed to be the best in the state. I am the best in the state. And I'm telling you, she's finished. Done. Dead. Garrett held him there for 3 seconds, then shoved him away so hard, Nolan tripped over his own toolbox.
Get out. Every single one of you. Useless. Pathetic. Useless.
The crowd was bigger now. Word moves fast when Hell's Angels are angry. 60 people pressed against the fence. Mechanics from other shops came to watch. Riders from other chapters. Neighbors on porches. Kids on bicycles. Then came Curtis Wade, former aerospace engineer turned motorcycle consultant, the smart one, the one who showed up with a laptop, a voltage meter, a current probe, and a smile that said he already knew the answer. He plugged in, ran diagnostics, scrolled through data, typed notes, cross-referenced wiring diagrams on his screen. He looked professional. He looked thorough. 20 minutes later, he stood up and delivered his verdict like a doctor delivering bad news. Full engine replacement, new crankshaft, new cylinders, new camshaft, new primary chain. We're talking 8,000 minimum. Could push 12 depending on parts availability for a 72 shovel head. Garrett's jaw clenched so hard the veins in his temple pulsed. $8,000 to $12,000. To fix a bike that 3 of you so-called experts can't even diagnose properly. Curtis closed his laptop. I don't make the rules of physics, Mr. Steele. No, you just waste my time. Curtis left, calm, collected. Wrong. Garrett stood alone next to Black Fury. The summer heat pressed down on the asphalt. He pulled a thick roll of hundreds from his vest and slammed it on the table. $5,000, cash, in the open. $5,000, right now. Anyone who can make her run in 1 hour takes it all. No excuses, no, I need to take it to my shop. Right here, right now. Silence. Not one hand went up. Not one voice. $5,000 baking in the Detroit sun, and not a single person in that crowd willing to touch Black Fury. That's when Owen walked past. He wasn't there for the bikes. He wasn't there for the money. He was walking home from his second shift, 6 hours at the car wash on Livernois Avenue, 4 hours stocking shelves at the gas station on Grand River. His shoes were splitting at the soles. His shirt smelled like industrial soap and exhaust fumes. He had $11 in his pocket and a library book in his backpack. But he heard something. Not the crowd. Not the country music leaking from the bar. He heard the engine. Or rather, he heard what was hiding inside the silence. A faint metallic whisper coming from Black Fury's engine block. A sound so quiet that Dale's scanner missed it, that Nolan's hands missed it, that Curtis's laptop never even looked for it. Owen stopped walking, tilted his head, closed his eyes for half a second, and he knew. He walked toward the bike, hands in his pockets, slow, like he had nowhere to be. Garrett spotted him from 15 feet away. The hell are you looking at? Your bike. I think I know what's wrong with it. Garrett looked at Owen's shoes, looked at his stained shirt, looked at his skinny arms. Then he laughed. Not a real laugh, a laugh designed to humiliate. You hear that, boys? This little piece of garbage thinks he knows what's wrong. The crowd rippled. Someone yelled, "Go home, kid." Someone else, "Wrong neighborhood, bro." A biker. Thick beard, neck tattoos, arms like concrete pillars, walked up and flicked Owen's ear, hard enough to sting. You lost, little boy? Daycare's down the street. Another one grabbed Owen's backpack and ripped it off his shoulders, unzipped it, dumped everything on the asphalt. A crushed sandwich, a water bottle, the library book, Fundamentals of Internal Combustion Engines. The biker picked up the book, read the title out loud in a mocking voice. The crowd howled. He dropped it in a puddle of oil and stomped on it. That's where your education belongs, in the dirt, just like you. Owen bent down, picked up the book, wiped the oil off with his sleeve, put it back in his bag. Garrett watched all of this with his arms crossed. You done? Or you need another lesson in where you belong? Owen zipped his bag, stood up straight. Those same quiet eyes. I can fix it. Garrett moved fast, got right in Owen's face. So close, Owen could smell the whiskey, the tobacco, the engine grease baked into his skin. Listen carefully, boy. You see these hands? Scarred knuckles, prison ink. These hands have cracked skulls. You see these brothers? He swept his arm across 15 Hell's Angels. They've done worse. And you stand here in your ripped shoes and your car wash cologne, and you tell me you can fix my father's bike? He shoved Owen hard. Owen stumbled back 4 steps. His backpack hit the ground again. You're nothing. You hear me? You are absolutely nothing. You wash cars, you stock shelves, you will never be anything more than what you are right now. A dirty, broke, worthless nobody standing in the wrong parking lot. 60 people. Phones out, live streams running, chat flooding with laughing emojis and fire emojis. Not one person said stop. Not one person stepped forward. Not one person looked Owen in the eye and said, "That's enough." Owen picked up his bag. Again. Stood up. Again. 5 minutes. If I can't fix it, I'll wash every bike here for free. Every single one. If I can, you pay the $5,000. And you apologize. Out loud. In front of everyone. Dead silence. Then the parking lot erupted. Bikers slamming fists on tables, people screaming. Someone threw a half-empty beer bottle that shattered 2 feet from Owen's legs. You hear this, kid? He wants an apology from Hell's Angels. Garrett tilted his head, that predator smile. And when you fail, because you will fail, you don't walk out. You crawl. On your hands and knees, past every single person here. Deal? Deal. Garrett spit on his hand and held it out. Owen shook it without hesitation. What nobody knew, what not a single person holding a phone could have possibly guessed, was that Owen Fletcher had been rebuilding engines since he was 9 years old. And that faint metallic whisper he heard coming from Black Fury, he'd heard it 100 times before. In his father's garage, on his father's workbench, with his father's hands guiding his. Stay with me, because what happens next changes everything. Thomas Fletcher never owned a single thing that wasn't broken first. His garage sat on the corner of Gratiot and Concord, East Detroit, a cinder block box with a corrugated roof that leaked when it rained and baked when it didn't. No sign out front, no website, just a chain link fence, a gravel lot, and a reputation that traveled by word of mouth through every neighborhood east of Woodward Avenue. People brought Thomas the things nobody else would touch. A 1965 Mustang with a seized engine that 3 shops declared dead. Thomas had it running in 2 days. A fishing boat motor that hadn't turned over in 6 years. Thomas rebuilt it on a Saturday afternoon, while Owen sat on an overturned bucket, watching every move his father's hands made. Owen was 9 the first time Thomas put a wrench in his hand. Don't just grab it, feel the bolt first. Let the metal talk to you. Owen didn't understand. Not then. He just liked being in the garage. The smell of oil and steel, the sound of his father humming while he worked, the way Thomas would hold a part up to the light and turn it slowly, like he was reading a story written in the scratches. By 10, Owen could name every component of a 4-stroke engine blindfolded. Thomas would pull a part from a junkyard pile and hold it behind his back. Owen identified it by touch alone. Connecting rod, piston ring, rocker arm, valve spring, every time. By 11, Owen started hearing things. Not voices, not music, something else. He'd stand next to a running engine and hear layers. Most people heard noise, a single wall of mechanical sound. Owen heard instruments. The intake valves had a pitch. The exhaust had a rhythm. The timing chain had a tempo. And when something was off, even slightly, Owen heard it the way a concert pianist hears a flat note in an orchestra. Thomas tested him, started an engine with a deliberately loosened rocker arm. Owen found it in 8 seconds. Started another with a hairline crack in the exhaust manifold. Owen pointed to the exact cylinder in under a minute. You've got the ear, son. No school teaches that. No machine replicates it. Thomas had one phrase he repeated every single day. Every morning before they opened the garage. Every night before they locked up. Listen before you touch. The engine tells you everything. Owen heard it so many times it stopped being words. It became instinct, a reflex wired into his nervous system. Then Thomas died. Owen was 14, a Tuesday in November. Thomas was underneath a delivery truck, routine brake job, when the jack failed. 7,000 pounds of steel on a man who weighed 180. The ambulance took 11 minutes. Thomas was gone in 4. Owen didn't cry at the funeral. He went to the garage the next morning, sat on the same overturned bucket, and stared at his father's tools on the pegboard wall. Each one in its exact place. Each one with years of grip marks worn into the handle. He picked up his father's favorite wrench, a 1/2-inch Craftsman with a chip on the jaw, and held it for a long time. Then he started working. For 4 years, Owen taught himself everything Thomas didn't have time to finish teaching. YouTube tutorials at the public library, engineering textbooks from the used bookstore on 7 Mile, 50 cents each, covers torn, pages stained with coffee. He pulled engines out of junked cars at the salvage yard on 8 Mile, rebuilt them on the garage floor, sold them to local shops for $50, sometimes $100. The garage went under when Owen was 16. Back taxes. His grandmother Ruth couldn't keep up on a fixed income. The county seized the property. Owen stood on the sidewalk and watched a stranger padlock his father's garage shut. He took the toolbox. That was all he could carry. His father's tools, wrapped in an old bedsheet, stuffed into a backpack that barely zipped closed. By 17, 2 jobs. Car wash, gas station. 11-hour days, 6 days a week. Every paycheck went to Ruth for rent and groceries. Nothing for himself, except bus fare and library books. But every night, every single night, he'd sit on the fire escape of their apartment on Chain Street, close his eyes, and listen. Trucks on the freeway. Generators behind the factory. The neighbor's Buick idling rough 3 floors down. He could diagnose that Buick from the fire escape. Bad ignition coil. Cylinder 2 misfire. The neighbor spent $400 at a shop a week later. They replaced the coil. Owen was right. He was always right. He just never had the chance to prove it to anyone who mattered. Until tonight. Until Black Fury. Until a parking lot full of people who looked at Owen Fletcher and saw nothing. They were about to see everything. The timer started at 7:47 p.m. Someone in the crowd, a kid with a backwards cap and a cracked phone screen, held up the stopwatch app and yelled, 5 minutes, go! Owen didn't rush. He set his backpack on the ground, unzipped it, and pulled out his father's toolbox. A dented metal case, olive green, with T. Fletcher scratched into the lid in block letters. He opened it and laid the tools out on the asphalt in a neat row. 1/2-inch Craftsman wrench, 1/4-inch socket set, flathead screwdriver, Phillips, a small flashlight with electrical tape around the handle. That was it. No scanner, no laptop, no voltage meter. Garrett looked at the tools and burst out laughing. Are you kidding me? That's what you brought? My kid's toy set has more in it than that. His crew roared. One of them kicked a socket wrench across the pavement. Oops, hope you didn't need that one, rat. Owen picked it up, wiped it on his shirt, put it back in line. A biker named Vince, 6'4", 260, skull tattoo crawling up his neck, stepped forward and stood directly over Owen, blocking the light. He leaned down and whispered, "You've got 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Better start crawling now. Save yourself the embarrassment." Owen didn't look up. He knelt beside Black Fury, placed both palms flat on the engine block, and closed his eyes. The crowd went quiet, not out of respect, out of confusion. "He's praying," someone yelled. "The kid's actually praying to the engine. Somebody pull this clown off before he drools on the chrome." A beer can sailed through the air and bounced off the ground next to Owen's knee. He didn't flinch. Garrett cupped his hands around his mouth. "Yo, circus boy, clock's running. You here to fix a bike or take a nap?" Owen didn't hear any of them. His palms pressed against the cooling fins, his fingers spread across the cylinder heads. He felt the metal the way his father taught him, not with his hands, but through them. Then he leaned in closer, pressed his ear against the rocker cover, tapped the engine block 3 times with his knuckle. Light, precise, like a doctor checking a heartbeat. Garrett's grin faded, just slightly. He'd never seen anyone touch a bike like that. 40 seconds in, and he's making love to my engine, Garrett said. "Somebody get this pervert off my Harley." Owen opened his eyes, pulled the flashlight from the toolbox, aimed it at the primary chain cover, then moved it to the carburetor bowl, then to the ground wire junction at the frame bolt. 3 spots, 3 seconds each. He stood up. 3 problems, Owen said. Quiet, calm, like he was reading a grocery list. Not 1, 3. That's why nobody could fix it. They each found one thing, assumed that was everything, and gave up. Garrett's nostrils flared. 3 problems in 40 seconds. Dale Prescott couldn't find one in 30 minutes. And you worthless little car wash monkey, you figured out 3? Dale was looking with his eyes. I listened. You listened. Garrett grabbed Owen by the back of the neck and turned him to face the crowd. He listened, everyone. Standing ovation for the engine whisperer. Somebody get this freak a Grammy and a sandwich. Looks like he hasn't eaten in a week. The parking lot erupted, people screaming with laughter. Vince mimicked Owen's pose, palms on an invisible engine, eyes closed, mouth open, and the crowd lost it. Someone started chanting, "Crawl, crawl, crawl." But one person didn't laugh. She was standing at the back of the crowd, gray hair pulled into a tight bun, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, a plain navy windbreaker over a white polo shirt. She looked like someone's grandmother at a Sunday market. Eleanor Graves, 68 years old, retired chief engineer at Harley-Davidson's powertrain division in Milwaukee. 31 years designing, testing, and certifying every engine that left the factory floor. She held 4 patents on valve train geometry. She'd written the diagnostic manual that every Harley dealer in America kept on their shelf. She was in Detroit visiting her daughter, took a wrong turn on Michigan Avenue, saw the crowd and the row of Harleys, and pulled over out of curiosity. Now she was watching Owen Fletcher with an expression that nobody in that parking lot would have recognized, because none of them had ever seen what Eleanor Graves looked like when she spotted genuine talent. She didn't say a word. She just moved closer. Owen knelt back down, wrench in hand. He glanced at the timer on the kid's phone. 1 minute and 12 seconds gone. 3 minutes and 48 seconds left. "I'm going to fix all 3, Owen said, in order. Timing chain first, then carburetor, then electrical ground." Garrett marched over, grabbed a fistful of Owen's shirt, and yanked him up off his knees. "You listen to me, you little piece of filth. You break one bolt, one wire, one scratch on that chrome, and 5 minutes won't matter, because I will personally make sure you never hold a wrench again. You understand me? I will snap every finger on your dirty little hands. Owen held his stare, steady. I understand. Garrett shoved him back down. Owen's knees hit the asphalt hard. He didn't make a sound. Clock's ticking, boy. Crawl position is waiting. Vince cracked his knuckles behind Owen. 2 other bikers moved closer, flanking him on both sides. Arms crossed, shadows falling over the engine, not helping. Hovering. Waiting for the moment they'd get to drag this kid across the parking lot on his hands and knees. The crowd pressed in tighter, phones everywhere. 60 screens glowing in the evening heat. Live stream viewers climbing. 200, 500, 1,000. Comments flooding in. This kid is toast. Hell's Angel's gonna eat him alive. No way he fixes that in 5 minutes, LOL. Somebody call this boy's mama. Owen blocked it all out. Every voice, every laugh, every camera flash. He picked up the half-inch Craftsman, his father's wrench, the one with the chip on the jaw, and positioned it on the first bolt of the cam cover. His hands weren't shaking. His breathing was even. His eyes were locked on that engine like nothing else in the universe existed. Eleanor Graves uncrossed her arms. She recognized something in the way Owen held that wrench, the angle of his wrist, the pressure of his fingers, the way he braced his elbow against the cylinder for leverage. Textbook form. No, better than textbook. Instinct. She took out her phone, not to record, to time him herself. 3 minutes and 30 seconds remained. Owen took one breath. Then he began. The first bolt came off in 3 seconds. Owen's fingers moved with a precision that didn't belong to an 18-year-old. The cam cover lifted clean. No fumbling, no hesitation. Like he'd opened this exact engine 1,000 times. Underneath, the timing chain sat exposed. A long loop of roller chain wrapped around the cam sprocket and the crankshaft sprocket, connecting the top and bottom halves of the engine's breathing system. On a healthy shovel head, the chain would be taut, aligned, every link seated perfectly on every tooth. This one wasn't. Owen pointed his flashlight at the cam sprocket. 2 teeth off. The chain had slipped forward by exactly 2 positions. Subtle, almost invisible. On a modern engine, a sensor would catch it, but on a 1972 shovel head with mechanical points, there was no sensor, no warning light, no error code. Just an engine that refused to fire because the valves were opening and closing milliseconds off, enough to kill compression entirely. Timing chain slipped 2 teeth, Owen said. Not to Garrett, not to the crowd, to himself. The way his father used to talk through a diagnosis out loud. He loosened the cam sprocket bolt, rotated the sprocket backward by hand. 2 clicks. Felt the chain seat into position. Tightened the bolt. Checked the tension with his thumb. Pressed the chain midway between sprockets. Measured the deflection by feel. 12 seconds. The whole repair took 12 seconds. Dale Prescott stood at the edge of the crowd. His face went white. 30 minutes with a $4,000 scanner. Missed completely. Because scanners don't read mechanical timing on points ignition engines. They search for electronic signals that don't exist on a 72 shovelhead. Owen found it with his ear and confirmed it with a $2 flashlight. That's one, Owen said. Garrett glanced at Vince, then back at Owen. Lucky guess. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut. Hey, rat! Garrett barked louder, making sure every phone in the lot picked it up. One lucky poke doesn't make you a mechanic. My dead grandmother could have knocked that chain back if she tripped over it. You want a cookie? You want me to clap for you? He slow clapped, loud, mocking. The crowd joined in, 60 pairs of hands beating a rhythm designed to humiliate. Clap louder, boys! The car wash kid fixed one thing. Somebody call the news! Alert the president! Vince grabbed Owen's shoulder and spun him around. You got lucky once, Roach. Touch that engine again and I'll snap that wrench in half and feed it to you. Owen turned back to the bike without a word. He pulled the carburetor bowl off with 4 quick turns of a Phillips head. Inside, the float, a small brass pontoon controlling fuel level, was supposed to ride freely, opening and closing a needle valve to regulate gasoline entering the carburetor throat. This float was stuck, jammed fully open by a microscopic piece of debris, a flake of old gasket material wedged between the float arm and the bowl wall. With the needle valve permanently open, fuel poured in non-stop. The cylinders flooded. Raw gasoline pooled on top of the pistons. A flooded cylinder can't compress. It hydraulic locks. Even if the timing had been perfect, the engine would never have fired. This was Nolan Briggs's mistake. He'd pulled the carb apart, cleaned every jet, checked every gasket, but he never tested the float under load. On a Cahin Butterfly carb from 1972, the float doesn't look stuck unless you press exactly the right spot, exactly the right way. Owen pressed. Index finger on the pivot point. Gentle push at 15 degrees off axis. The debris flake popped free. The float dropped to neutral. The needle valve clicked shut. Owen held up the flake between his thumb and finger, smaller than a grain of rice. This is why she flooded. Float stuck open. Fuel pouring straight through. Nolan Briggs shoved through the crowd, face twisted. Not anger. The specific shame of a specialist watching his reputation dissolve in public. I checked that float. I checked it twice. You checked it assembled, Owen said. No malice. The debris only shows at 15 degrees off axis, known defect on pre-74 Kians. Harley issued a technical service bulletin in 1978, bulletin number HD-78-041. The crowd murmured, a bulletin number, from memory, from a kid who couldn't afford new shoes. Garrett stepped in fast, jabbed his finger into Owen's chest so hard Owen rocked backward. So you memorized a number. My grandmother memorizes bingo numbers, doesn't make her an engineer. 2 down, Owen said, like he hadn't felt a thing. Garrett's face flushed dark red. 2 lucky finds don't make you special, boy. They make you a freak who got lucky twice. He grabbed Owen's shirt with both fists and lifted him onto his toes. Buttons popped, fabric stretched. You got a real mouth for someone standing in a parking lot full of people who'd love to shut it permanently. One more smug whisper, and I will make sure that mouth never opens again. He dropped Owen. Owen stumbled, caught himself, straightened what was left of his collar. A biker kicked Owen's toolbox across the asphalt, tools clattering everywhere. Tick-tock, garbage boy, clock's running. Owen walked to the toolbox, picked it up, reorganized the tools without rushing, set it back beside the bike. The laughter had thinned. People were exchanging uneasy glances. A woman near the fence whispered to her husband, "How did he know that bulletin number?" A teenager lowered his phone for the first time, not to stop recording, but to actually watch with his own eyes. An old man near the back shook his head and muttered, "Lord have mercy." Eleanor Graves stood perfectly still. She had written Bulletin HD-78-041 in her office on Juneau Avenue in Milwaukee, 30 years ago. Page 14 of the 1978 Shovelhead Supplemental Diagnostic Guide. She remembered the typewriter she'd used. This 18-year-old had just quoted it from memory. Her hand was trembling against her hip. 2 minutes and 10 seconds remained. Owen moved to the third problem, the invisible one, the one that would have stumped even Eleanor if she hadn't been watching from the start. He lay flat and slid under the frame, warm asphalt against his back, gravel pressing into his shoulder blades. The crowd pushed closer above, phones tilted down like searchlights, live stream viewers past 4,000. Comments had nearly stopped. Even the internet was holding its breath. Vince stepped back from the bike. Not respect. He didn't want to be on camera when this kid proved him wrong. Owen's flashlight found the ground wire junction, a single bolt connecting the engine's ground strap to the frame rail. On paper, the simplest connection on the motorcycle. A bolt, a wire, two metal surfaces. In practice, the most overlooked failure point on any vintage machine ever built. The bolt was tight, the wire intact. Everything looked perfect. Owen scraped his thumbnail across the contact surface. Green oxidation. Copper carbonate, formed by months of moisture and road salt creeping under the strap. Just enough electrical resistance to weaken the spark from the ignition points. Not enough to show on a voltage meter reading from the battery, but more than enough to make the engine crank endlessly without firing. This was Curtis Wade's blind spot. His laptop probes touched the wire, not the junction surface beneath the bolt head. The resistance lived at the contact point itself, a quarter-inch circle of corroded metal that no diagnostic software on Earth was designed to catch on a 54-year-old motorcycle with no computer and no sensors. Owen pulled a strip of emery cloth from his back pocket. Folded twice, edges worn soft. He always carried one, because his father always carried one. Thomas Fletcher kept a strip in his left back pocket every day for 23 years. Short, firm strokes, green to brown to bright copper gleaming against clean steel. He repositioned the ground strap flat against the frame, tightened the bolt by feel, firm, then a quarter turn more, slid out from under the bike, stood up, brushed the gravel from his back and shoulders. Bad ground, corroded junction at the frame bolt. She's been losing spark for months, probably since last winter, getting weaker every ride until she finally quit. He picked up each tool and placed it back in the toolbox. Wrench next to socket set. Screwdriver beside flashlight. Everything in its exact position. The way Thomas Fletcher kept them. The way Thomas Fletcher taught him. Closed the lid. That's 3. The parking lot was silent. Not the nervous silence after the first fix. Not the confused silence after the second. This was different. This was the silence of 60 people realizing, all at once, that they had been completely, utterly wrong. 60 phones still recording, not one person typing. The live stream chat frozen, 4,000 viewers across the country holding their breath. Garrett Steele stood 6 feet from his own motorcycle, arms at his sides, not crossed, not clenched, mouth slightly open, eyes locked on Owen's hands, the same hands he'd called dirty, worthless, and broken, now resting on a dented olive-green toolbox scratched with T. Fletcher. Eleanor Graves walked forward. The crowd parted without thinking, bikers stepping aside for a 68-year-old woman in a Navy windbreaker. She knelt beside Black Fury, pressed 2 fingers against the timing chain. Correct. Pushed the carburetor float, swung freely. Correct. Slid her thumbnail across the ground junction. Bright copper, 0 oxidation, bolt torqued tight. Correct. Every diagnosis, every repair, every single detail. She stood slowly, looked at Owen with recognition. The kind that comes from 31 years of knowing exactly what excellence looks like, and finding it in the last place anyone would look. Every single one, she said, quiet enough that only Owen and Garrett could hear. Perfect. I've trained engineers for 3 decades. Most couldn't do what you just did. None could do it this fast. Owen nodded, wiped his hands on his jeans, looked at Garrett. Now try it. Garrett stood over Black Fury. He hadn't sat on that bike in 3 days, not since she died on Interstate 94. Not since the tow truck dragged her back to this parking lot like a corpse on a stretcher. He looked at Owen, then at the bike, then back at Owen. If this doesn't start, Garrett said quietly, you know what happens. Owen said nothing. He stepped back, folded his arms, waited. Garrett swung his leg over the seat. His hands found the grips, muscle memory from 30 years of riding. His right boot found the kickstart pedal. He'd done this 10,000 times. But this time his foot hesitated. A fraction of a second that 60 people noticed and 4,000 live stream viewers would replay in slow motion for weeks. He kicked. The engine turned over once, a dry, mechanical gasp. Then silence. Owen's expression didn't change. Not a flinch, not a blink. Garrett kicked again. This time, Black Fury caught. A single cylinder fired, then the second, and the shovelhead engine exploded to life with a sound that rattled every window on Michigan Avenue. A deep, thundering, unmistakable roar, the kind that vibrates in your chest before it reaches your ears, the kind that makes your teeth hum and your ribs ache. Black Fury was alive. The exhaust barked twice, then settled into a rhythm, steady, deep, perfectly timed. No sputter, no hesitation, no cough, just pure, unbroken mechanical heartbeat pounding through 54 years of American steel. Garrett's hands tightened on the grips, knuckles white. He revved the throttle, once, twice, and the engine responded instantly. Crisp, angry, hungry, like a dog chained too long that finally broke free. The timer on the kid's phone read 4 minutes and 51 seconds. 4:51, under 5, 9 seconds to spare. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was Black Fury's engine drumming against the evening air, echoing off the concrete walls of the iron rail, rolling down Michigan Avenue like distant thunder. Then the dam broke. A woman near the fence screamed. Not a word, just a sound, raw, involuntary. The teenager who'd lowered his phone dropped it entirely. It hit the asphalt screen first, and he didn't look down. The old man in the back took off his hat and pressed it against his chest. Someone started clapping. Real clapping. Not mocking. Not sarcastic. The kind that starts with one person and spreads like fire through dry grass. Within 5 seconds, 60 people were on their feet, clapping, shouting, some of them with tears they couldn't explain streaming down their faces. The live stream chat detonated. No way did that just happen. 5 minutes, bro, 5 minutes. This kid is a legend. I'm literally crying in a Wendy's parking lot right now. Garrett sat on Black Fury with the engine rumbling beneath him. His jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his temples twitched. His eyes were wet. Not sadness, not anger. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Something he didn't have a word for, because men like Garrett Steele didn't keep words for feelings like that. His father built this engine, by hand, in a garage not so different from the one Owen grew up in. For 3 days, Garrett thought that engine was dead, thought the last living piece of his old man had finally given up. And an 18-year-old kid, a kid he'd grabbed by the throat, spit on, called a cockroach, called garbage, called nothing, brought it back in under 5 minutes with a dead man's wrench. Garrett killed the engine. The silence that followed was louder than the roar. He sat there for a long moment, then swung his leg off and stood face to face with Owen Fletcher. The crowd held its breath. Garrett looked at Owen's eyes, steady, quiet. The same eyes that hadn't flinched when he'd been shoved, spit on, humiliated in front of 60 strangers and 4,000 screens. Garrett opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. He reached into his vest, pulled out the roll of hundreds, $5,000, held it out toward Owen. His hand was shaking. Owen didn't reach for it. Not yet. "You owe me something else," Owen said. Quiet, not aggressive, just a fact. Garrett's jaw worked. The veins in his neck pulsed. Every biker in that lot watched their president, the man who'd never backed down from anyone, ever, stand in front of a teenager and struggle with 2 words he'd never said to another human being in his life. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you're too young, too poor, too different to matter, remember this parking lot. Remember Owen Fletcher's 5 minutes. Remember that every single person here laughed, and every single one was wrong. Drop a comment. What's your 5-minute moment? That one chance you never got, or the one you're still waiting for? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And hit subscribe, because I've got more stories that'll remind you why you should never underestimate the quiet ones. The word came out like a bone breaking. Sorry. Garrett said it once, low, rough, like it had been buried under 30 years of concrete and pride, and he'd had to crack himself open to let it out. He didn't say it again. He didn't need to. Every phone caught it. 4,000 live stream viewers watched the president of the Detroit Hells Angels chapter apologize to an 18-year-old kid in a grease-stained shirt. Nobody laughed. Not this time. Owen took the money, $5,000, didn't count it, just folded the roll and slid it into his back pocket, the same pocket where his father's emery cloth lived. Garrett turned and walked toward his crew. Nobody joked. Nobody smirked. Vince, the man who'd threatened to snap Owen's wrench in half, stepped aside without being asked. He stared at the ground, couldn't meet Owen's eyes. Then Eleanor Graves stepped forward. The noise died. Something about the way she moved, unhurried, deliberate, like gravity itself made room for her, made 60 people stop talking at once. My name is Eleanor Graves. 31 years as chief engineer in Harley-Davidson's powertrain division in Milwaukee. She let that settle across the crowd. What this young man just did, 3 separate faults, diagnosed by ear, repaired by hand, under 5 minutes, with tools older than he is something I have never seen. Not once. Not from anyone in my career. She pulled a business card from her windbreaker, plain white, black text. Harley-Davidson's Advanced Apprenticeship Program. Full scholarship. Housing included. Salary from day 1. She held it out to Owen. I am personally recommending you. Owen looked at the card, then at Eleanor. His hand was steady when he took it, steadier than Garrett's had been. Thank you, ma'am. The kid with the cracked phone zoomed in on the card. The live stream caught it. Within 48 hours, that video would hit 2 million views. Within a week, Owen Fletcher's name would appear in headlines he'd never imagined reading. But right now, none of that had happened yet. Right now, it was just an 18-year-old holding a white business card under a Detroit sky turning orange at the edges, with $5,000 in his pocket and his father's tools at his feet. The video hit 1 million views in 24 hours. By the second day, it was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook groups for vintage motorcycle collectors, Reddit threads with thousands of comments, news aggregators running headlines like Teen Mechanic Humiliates Biker Gang in 5 Minutes, and Hells Angels Bet $5K an 18-year-old made them pay. And with the video came consequences. Dale Prescott felt it first. The man with the biggest garage in Wayne County, 40 years of experience, a wall of certificates behind his desk. His phone started ringing the morning after the video dropped, not with new customers, with cancellations. If a teenager with a flashlight can find what you missed in 30 minutes, why am I paying you $200 an hour? That was the polite version. Most weren't polite at all. Dale lost 11 clients in the first week. By the end of the month, his revenue had dropped 40%. He had to let 2 technicians go. The certificates on his wall hadn't changed, but the eyes reading them had. Nolan Briggs had it worse. The internet found the exact live stream moment where Nolan said, "I checked that float twice." They put it side by side with Owen popping the debris free in 2 seconds flat. The clip became a meme overnight. "I checked it twice" turned into a punchline across every motorcycle forum in America. 2 classic bike clubs, the Great Lakes Heritage Riders and the Motor City Vintage Collective, canceled their maintenance contracts within the week. A third club sent a letter that simply read, "We've decided to go in a different direction." Nolan's wife told a neighbor he hadn't slept through the night since the video went up. Curtis Wade became the internet's favorite villain. Someone clipped his confident diagnosis, full engine replacement, 8,000 minimum, then cut directly to Owen fixing all 3 problems in under 5 minutes with hand tools. The side-by-side racked up 600,000 views on its own. Comments piled in like an avalanche. $8,000 for what a kid fixed with a wrench and sandpaper? Curtis Wade's School of Engineering. If you can't fix it, replace everything. Curtis deleted his social media accounts within 72 hours. His consulting website went dark a day later. A former client posted a 1-star review that said only, "Ask him about the shovel head." And then there was Garrett. Garrett Steele didn't lose his business, didn't lose his club, didn't get publicly shamed the way the 3 mechanics did. But something shifted inside the Hells Angels Detroit chapter that nobody talked about openly. The other chapters heard the story. Of course they did. Their chapter president had bet $5,000, called a teenager every name in the book, grabbed him by the throat, spit on him, and then stood frozen in a parking lot while that same teenager proved him wrong in front of the entire internet. At the next regional meeting, someone from the Toledo chapter asked Garrett during a break. Casual, almost friendly. "So, you really spit on that kid?" Garrett didn't answer. He walked out of the room. But 3 weeks later, when a brother from the Cleveland chapter called asking if anyone knew a good mechanic for a vintage knucklehead, Garrett gave them a name. No explanation, no context, no story. "Call Owen Fletcher. He's the best I've ever seen." It was the closest Garrett Steele would ever come to saying sorry a second time. Owen used the money to clear his grandmother's back taxes, enough to remove the padlock from the garage on Gratiot and Concord. He walked in on a Tuesday morning. The air smelled like dust and motor oil, and underneath, something waiting. He hung his father's tools on the pegboard, each one in its place. The half-inch Craftsman with the chip on the jaw, center hook, where Thomas kept it. He opened the garage door. Sunlight hit the concrete for the first time in 2 years. That evening, Owen sat on his father's overturned bucket, pressed his ear against his first customer's engine, closed his eyes, and smiled. The same smile Thomas Fletcher wore. Quiet, certain. A man who listens before he touches, because the engine tells you everything. Hashtag Owen Fletcher. Hashtag 5-minute fix. Hashtag justice for talent. Hashtag never underestimate. Share this with someone who needs it. Subscribe. Every week, a story to remind you, never underestimate the quiet ones.
You know what nobody can take from you? What you learned from someone who loved you. not a classroom, not a certificate, not a fancy tool with a screen, a thing someone put into your hands patiently, quietly, night after night. That's the thing that lasts. That's the thing that shows up when it matters most. And the world will laugh. They will look at the shoes, the clothes, the age, and decide you are nothing before you even open your mouth. They will hand the job to the guy with the biggest toolbox and the longest resume. And when the HA fails, they will hand it to the next guy just like him. And when HA fails too, they will say it can't be done, but it can be. That's not by them, because they were so busy looking impressive that they forgot to actually listen. And listening, real listening, the kind that lives in your hands and your gut, in your bones, that's something no amount of money can buy. So, when your moment comes, and it will come, don't ask for permission. Pick up your wrench and say, give me 5 minutes, and let the work shut every mouth in the room. Like, share, and subscribe your story. Visit us every week. And remember, never underestimate the quiet ones. They're not quiet because they have nothing to say. They're quiet because they are listening. And that's exactly why they win.